Let all of God's people say amen.
Amen.
Let all God's people say praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
For great is the Lord. Come on, we can do better than that. Some of you got it. I say great is the Lord, and you say greatly to be praised. And let's just give God a rousing praise in this place today. Great is the Lord.
And greatly to be praised.
Now, if you really believe it, put your holy hands together and let's give God praise in this place. My sisters and my brothers, I need not say that I am honored to be standing here today, but you should know that it is certainly a privilege and a blessing to be able to stand before you, my sisters and brothers of the Oklahoma Conference of the United Methodist Church. Don't take it lightly. And I pray that with your prayers, that you would join me in just asking God to have God's way in this place today and speak a word that might encourage our hearts and lift our spirits, that we might be able to stand.
When you've done all you can, and it seems like it's never enough. And what do you say when your friends turn away and you're all alone, all alone? Tell me, what do you give when you're giving your all? Seems like you can't make it through. Well, you just stand when there's nothing left to do. You just stand, watch the Lord see you through. Yes, after you've done all you can, you just stand. Tell me, how do you deal with the shame? And how can you smile while your heart has been broken and filled with pain, filled with pain? Tell me, what do you give? Yes. When you're giving your all, yeah. Seems like you can't make it through. Child, you just stand when there's nothing left to do. You just stand, watch the Lord see you through. Yes, after you've done all you can, you just stand and be sure, be not entangled in that bondage of can. After you've gone through the hurt, after you've gone through the pain, oh my. After you've gone through the storms, hallelujah. After you've gone through the rain, prayed and cried, prayed and cried, prayed and cried, prayed and cried, oh my. After you've done all you can, you just stand.
Hebrews 12:12. Now stand up straight. Stop your knees from shaking and walk a straight path. That's encouragement to myself. Then lame people will be healed instead of getting worse. Then down to 28 and 29. We should be grateful that we've been given a kingdom that cannot be shaken. This morning, my sisters and my brothers, with your prayers, I invite you to consider with me this tag for the text: an unshakable kingdom. An unshakable kingdom. I shared this message in part with our cabinet on the other day, and you got to be careful when people go off into a room and then they come back out. And they say, "Come in here. Boy, do we have a deal for you." But I was in that aura of what this weekend has been about for so many of us, as we think about the legacy and the purpose of Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. King talked about, on many occasions, this beloved community. And friends, when I think about the beloved community, and I read this text in in Hebrews chapter 12, I think about the unshakable kingdom. A kingdom that we are given that cannot be shaken. The unshakable kingdom, I'm speaking of the reign of God, a reign of righteousness and justice, a reign of compassion and concern. It's the beloved kingdom of all of God's children, a communion of all humanity, beyond social status, beyond skin color, beyond gender identity and nation of origin. It is a kingdom that is beyond educational status and bank account receipts. A kingdom that is beyond our past moral failures and theopolitical affinities. Human alienation can't stop it, and finite minds can't block it. The unshakable kingdom has foundations whose architect and builder is God. The unshakable kingdom is always a coming. It's dynamic, not static. It's that city not made with hands. It's rooted and reflected by the best of our prophetic tradition and spirituality. Have I got a witness? Let's be honest. Let's be honest here today. For many, the unshakable kingdom will be idealistic at best, and even naive to most. But as Arthur Grace and Matthew says, so much of our human history is about conquering and domination and slavery and imperialism and colonialism and exploitation and racism and tribalism and sexism and bloodshed and genocide and Holocaust and ethnic cleansing. Our track record is not all that good in dealing with people who are different from us. Matter of fact, our record in relationships with different people is bad. Grace adds that our history shows that when we have encountered others different from us, we've tried to silence them. We've silenced them through ridicule, silenced them through stereotyping, silenced them through humiliation. Still, I believe today that kingdom people hear a different voice. People of an unshakable kingdom march to a different drum. Some of you saw a movie that came out recently. It's the movie Harriet. I need to tell you that I absolutely loved Harriet, for it took me there as the movie talks about the life of the legendary abolitionist and freedom general Harriet Tubman. Harriet is portrayed by the British actress Cynthia Erivo. Harriet, as many of you remember, escaped from the hands of her slaveholders in the Maryland of 1849. And at great risk, she steadily became fearless and unshakable. Now, that's not how she started out. She just wanted to be free. But as she moved into her destiny, as she moved into her calling, as she followed the vision that God had given her, she became more and more fearless and bold and determined that she would guide passengers on this storied Underground Railroad. I recall this morning one riveting scene in the movie. It's the scene of Harriet rescuing a handful of slaves. And these runaway slaves were meandering through the woods and meandering through the back ways and through the crevices and meandering through what appeared to be some form of a wilderness. But they were on a journey toward freedom. The fleeing people made it to the banks of what appears to be a raging body of water. And at that moment, there is so much anxiety that the movie watchers could feel it almost through the screen. There was anxiety as the people were panicking, for they knew their options. They knew that if they would go forward, they would surely drown, for the waters were raging. And they knew that if they waited without inaction, they would be captured by their ruthless slaveholders.
So here they were camped out at the bank of a raging river, and they were worried, and they were frightened, and they were fearful of being humiliated and tortured and even killed. They were trapped. Has anybody here ever felt like you've been at that place of life where you're trapped? The anxiety grew and grew and grew. So just like so many of us, they began to argue with one another. They began to talk rebellion and overthrow and mutiny. Who is this Harriet that's brought us out here? For us to die. Sounds familiar? Others spoke of giving up on the journey, but friends, Harriet saw a different vision. Harriet was listening to a different voice. So, to the amazement of all who were gathered there that day, Harriet began to walk into the water. And there she was, and the water came up to her ankles, and I know what you're thinking, but the water still didn't part. The waters came up to her waist, and the water still didn't part. The waters got up to her shoulders and all the way up to her chin and almost to her nose. But as she kept walking, the water still didn't part. But you know what happened? She was able to walk on till she made it to the other side. Hey, Mary Harriet crossed the river to the other side. Friends, she, in that moment of challenge and in that moment of anxiety, Harriet embodied the quest for a new kind of humanity. She remembered the divine vision and the promise that brought them there. And when she remembered what God had told her, and when she remembered the promise of freedom by faith, when she kept on walking in the midst of her anxieties, in the midst of the challenge, she embarked upon an endless string of journeys back and forth to continue to free those people, because she heard God say, "Let my people go." She modeled quiet courage. She rescued more and more slaves with each miraculous expedition. Sisters and brothers, I ask you today, in these times of fear and anxiety, what kind of leadership does Harriet model for us? Theologian Reinhold Niebuhr stated that the only kingdom which can defy and conquer the world is one that is not of the world. I want to suggest that Harriet, in her willingness to face her fears, to face her anxieties, and keep going forward, model a kind of leadership, a quietly courageous leadership that remains poised, that remains purposeful, that remains risky in the face of anxiety and even the fear of what is to come. Niebuhr says that we can't just be of the world. In times like these, we must remember who we are, that we are a people of an unshakable kingdom. I think Dr. King was thinking of this unshakable kingdom which inspired him toward the destiny which made him one of history's truest liberators. And we won't get it twisted today. King was a liberator, not of black people alone. And I know that some folk love to have holidays like we had this past week and go to banquets and get together and hang out with people and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. I know we want to wax and brag on King's great oratory, but that's not what he was all about. King didn't come just for us to come and get along and come together and sing songs. King came that we might be changed as a nation, changed as a world, changed as God's people. In a world that's filled of hate and division, in a world that's filled with injustice, racism, and sexism, King came that we might be a different people, a people of an unshakable kingdom. His destiny was to announce freedom and redemption for all who were embedded in systems of moral and social complacency, cultural and ethnic arrogance, false pride, and self-righteousness. King taught us that we're all God's children. It's simple but revolutionary, and in a time when human life was regarded as a thing rather than a person, King held to hope. He held to the great possibility that all could be redeemed. All could be redeemed. Say that with me. All could be redeemed. And candidates for a kingdom not of this world. You and I don't have a heaven and a hell to put nobody in. We all are precious in God's sight. For I know that it's tempting to get caught up on world news tonight and fake news and pre-general conference reports and the protocol. But listen, there's a different sound in the midst of us. And it's not the sound of the kingdoms of this world. It's the sound of an unshakable kingdom of God. And I want to suggest this morning that above all, that we bear witness, church, to the hope and the light of Christ. We're called to expose the sins and the shame of the past. As long as 72% of the people who are in poverty in our nation are women and children, we got to be a part of a different kingdom. As long as black and brown people are filling our jails and mass incarceration is out of control, we have to be a part of a different kingdom. As long as the poor and the illiterate and education is failing our children, we have to be a part of a kingdom, not of this world. As long as the number of people who are unchurched and dechurched and those who are living without Christ are increasing more and more each year and decade, we have to be a part of a new kingdom, a kingdom that's not of this world. Not even the most regressive acts of hate and discrimination, spiritual warfare, bitter words, and deeds of darkness can keep God's people shaking in fear and from living the prophetic imagination, envisioning a better and abundant life, not just for those who are good enough, are righteous enough, are worthy enough, but for all. This is our faith. God didn't come to condemn the world, but that the world through him might have life, and that abundantly. In times like these, people of the unshakable kingdom remember who they are. They are live poised and courageously and full of integrity in times of great division. King came that we'll quit dividing ourselves simply by the left and the right. There are extremes on both ends. King came that we might be people of moral and spiritual integrity who care that the world has the hope and the love that's given to us by God through Jesus Christ. I believe this morning that only the spiritual and moral foundations of God's unshakable kingdom can cause us to stand in the midst of our turmoil. Yes, church, there's hope beyond our brokenness. There's deep healing for our sorrow. There's a balm in Gilead that can heal our sensitive souls and our emotional pain. It's called the unshakable kingdom. I believe that Rosa Parks grew up in the segregated South. Yet God had another vision. She heard a different voice. I believe that Rosa Parks took up residence as a citizen of the unshakable kingdom. You know the story. On December the 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Ms. Parks sat down on the front of the bus in a section that was reserved for whites only. Now, mind you, this was 65 years ago in the Deep South. Her actions, bold as they were, fearless as they were, it could have resulted in an arbitrary taking of life without due process, without protection from the law or even from the courts. But that day, Miss Parks wasn't having it. Y'all, she just wasn't feeling it. And sometimes you get sick and tired of being sick and tired. Have we got a witness? Yeah. On that day, her external behavior lined up with her internal convictions. And it was an audacious and rebellious act of moral agency. And I know we think of her as just this sweet little old lady. But if you get one thing out of this sermon, I want you to leave out of here and say, Rosa Parks ain't no sweet little old lady. She was bold because she was listening to another voice. And somebody asked her later, Rosa, why did you sit at the front of the bus that day? And she responded, I sat down because I was tired. And Evan, she wasn't talking just about her feet being tired. Her soul was tired. Her soul was tired. She was tired of going along with traditions of hate. She was tired of going along with traditions of discrimination and exclusion. She was tired of going along with rituals that were based on anxiety and fear. She was tired of acting the coward. It was rebellious. It was dangerous, yet to achieve justice, to achieve fairness, to achieve harmony, it was a risk worth living for. I'm talking about an unshakable kingdom. Friends, God, and I'm through, God invites us to live with courage, just as he was inviting those people in the context of Hebrews, the letter of the Hebrews to the Hebrews. They were discouraged. They were fearful. They were anxious. But the word of the Lord came to them and told them to straighten up. Even when your knees are shaking and when you're wobbling and your hands are drooping, stand up. And don't just stop there. Stand up and hook up. It says in verse 14, try to live at peace with everyone. I like the Revised Standard Version word, pursue peace with everyone and holiness, without which no one can see the Lord. For you've come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem. This is the city of the living God, where thousands of angels have come up. When you stand up and when you hook up, then you got to march up. See, some of y'all don't know what I'm talking about. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about. Some of you young preachers, they don't even sing these songs anymore that they were singing 35 years ago when I started seminary. You know, when I came there, I got there and they were singing this wonderful song, and it was called March into Zion. You know that song? Come ye that love the Lord, and let your joys be known. Join in a song of sweet accord. Join in a song of sweet accord and thus surround the throne and thus surround the throne. Hey, when you get discouraged and when you feel down and when your spirit is depleting, come on, look up and keep marching and realize that you didn't come to just any old place. God invites us to get on a journey. He invites us to look up and keep going higher and higher to that heavenly city of God. Anybody want to go today? Anybody want to travel today? Anybody want to get on the journey today? Come on, if you're thinking about it, if you're praying about it, if you believe it's time to be that people that God calls us to be, the people of an unshakable kingdom, come on, let's stand where we are today and let's give God the praise in this place. And let's just say to one another, tell your neighbor, I'm marching to Zion. That beautiful city of God. God bless you today. Cynthia Erivo portrayed Harriet in such a powerful way that I think I'd be remiss if I didn't allow you to be treated to this song that she sings that speaks of this journey, this vision that called her to keep going forward. Let's take a listen.